Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I am probably a pretty tried and true libertarian. I always think liberty over basically everything else. And I was listening to your live stream a few weeks ago, and you said something that really hit me square between the eyes that I had never thought about the libertarian ideology, which is that liberty has to be the thing that you freely choose as your top priority. Otherwise, it is of almost no value at all, because if you put anything else above liberty, then you don't have liberty.
Yeah, well, I think we're watching a lot of that in real time right now. That if it doesn't exist in our hearts and minds as a people, that it'll be sacrificed at every other level, including, in the government and culture, at the business level, everywhere. So, man, I mean, talk about a stress test for principles. 2020 has been nothing but,
There's like this weird push where everyone around you is saying, if you do anything that jeopardizes the safety of other people, you're bad. And yet I think there's people that have like an intrinsic value of liberty. And like, I think that hasn't been stress tested as much as it's about to be in the next couple of months.
Yeah, we're entering a really weird time as far as like what counts as an aggression against another person. I mean, that's kind of at the core of a lot of liberty or libertarian philosophy. Certainly, if I walk up and punch you in the face, like, yeah, that's not square with the non-aggression principle, right? But if I'm just out there existing, I mean, today, if you're out in public without a mask on, for example, that's viewed as an aggression against other people. And they can make the argument. I'm not saying there's nothing to be said there. Viral transmission is a real thing if you want to make the case. But increasingly, we are seeing more and more passive forms of behavior viewed as aggression itself. It's a really weird time. And I don't know what the end point on that is. Just being a person standing there can be viewed as aggressive. It's a weird time. I've never heard of that before, but here we are.
Well, and you think about the founding fathers, like there were absolutely diseases being spread at the time when they were writing the Constitution. And so if they thought, no, somebody being sick and spreading it to other people is something we should empower the government to stop at all costs, then we'd be in a different game. But it's only been just now that we're saying your disease can be something that I can hold against you.
Yes. And obviously, I think we have a moral responsibility to try to minimize that. I'm not going to go out and deliberately infect any other person. I'm not going to try to do those things. But to your point, coronavirus, this may be a novel virus. It may have more contagious properties than other viruses. But the idea of viral transmission being new, it's not new. This is we just haven't thought about it in this way before. We had Dave Cullen on our show a few months back, and he made the point, this was back in the spring, and I hadn't thought about it this way either, but you almost certainly have had a contagious virus of some sort, whether it's the flu, whether it's something else, and you unknowingly have probably passed that to another person who in turn passed that to somebody who's elderly, compromised. In that way, if we think about all of history and the way we think about 2020 and the coronavirus, you are undoubtedly responsible for someone's death. It's probably true for every single one of us. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to minimize that, but we have to remember that this has been going on for a long time, and that by simply being like viruses are a biological reality. They do pass from person to person. You're not gonna ever stop that, strictly speaking. We can try to minimize, but at what cost? The metaphor I like to use when we think about these problems, and I talk with people who might disagree with me. I mean, a lot of things can be achieved by totally isolating people and limiting humans to no interaction whatsoever. But the question is it moral? Like, I can reduce the murder rate by confining every single person to an isolated cell. I can drop the murder rate to zero. Would that be moral to do that, though? I don't know a lot of people who would say yes to that, but the reasoning extends that far. I know it sounds absurd, like that. Oh, that'll never happen. That's so crazy. But what is your limiting principle that stops you from just locking people up such that no harm could ever possibly be committed between them? I haven't heard it.
So a lot of people are probably wondering, like, who are you? Because I just jumped right in because I was so interested in your liberty conversation. But there's a reason that you've been able to think these thoughts all the way out, which is that you spend a great deal of your time being a political commentator. What is it that you do with your time? What is the setup behind you? Who are you?
Yeah, well, I do my own YouTube show. I do my own independent media, and that's kind of by accident, really. Like it's a hobby I started several years back, but I've been doing it full time for about 4 years. So mattchristiansenmedia.com is where that's the home for all my stuff if people want to check it out. But yeah, I do a long form stream that you might be referencing. We do that every Sunday night for a couple hours, and we're talking about the week's news and all the latest ongoings in politics and culture and all that. That's more of a current events type thing. And then I'm doing my own short videos twice a week. Those are usually in the 10 to 15 minute range. And I'm talking about one specific topic in a very focused way. Those are more like written out, planned ahead of time, scripted, such that I can be as precise as possible. But yeah, all of this was, it's just something I started doing a few years ago because I enjoyed doing it. And lo and behold, it's taken off such that I could make something of it. And so I've been doing it for about 4 years now, full time.
Were you always a person that liked talking about politics or news? Because you have this weird amalgamation of your show. It's not just politics. It's usually the news that is not being represented in a way that shows the full scope. But it's also not just politics either. It's a very interesting blend.
No, we have such weird niches. Like I've had a fascination with hoax hate crimes for years now. So it's like every week we're doing the hoax hate crime of the week. I mean, way before Jussie Smollett and all that stuff. Like I find that stuff really fascinating. But yeah, we call it, like when I started doing the stream, we called it the Sanity Safe Space as a joke. It's not like hard news. It's not like we're sitting there and trying to replicate a CNN or Fox broadcast. I think really what we're trying to do is create a home to discuss current events with people who are like-minded, people who turn on cable news and see it for the crap that it is, and people who generally are of a conservative or a pro-liberty perspective. We have a pretty wide range of views in our audience, from people who are much more authoritarian for my liking. It's actually it's pretty interesting and it's fun to interact with them. People who are of a right-wing perspective that is more authority heavy than I would like, but that's one of the reasons I like doing it. Like we have a broad audience of a lot of different perspectives, and it's not a home for one very specific narrow viewpoint. So the show has kind of evolved into its own community, and that's why we love doing it, man. It's people are making friendships in the audience. We had audience members just get married the last couple of weeks, so lots of cool stuff happening that way, and it's developed in its own organic way.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.